Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here, playing another session of 126 Max on Ignition. Thank you for joining. We'll jump right into our games. Upper left-hand table, we have a presumed recreational player limping under the gun. We're going to go ahead and isolate up from the cutoff, about a 20-21% range. Something like our middle position raise first in range there is a pretty good way to approach this spot. Everyone else folds except for the limper who limp calls. We get a 4-deuce-deuce two-tone flop. He checks to us, and we'll go ahead and range bet him small on that board. Looking to continue betting if we turn one of our overpairs or overcards for top pair. I could keep blasting with my overcards, given I've got so many different flush draws out there with the two different flush draws on the board. I think I can go ahead and just put this into a check back range and look to either bluff the river against another check or value bet or bluff catch if I make my pair. There we've got the king of diamonds, so we make top pair. We're going to go ahead and put our bet in, hoping to get called by worse. And he tanks and then calls, and we are good. Lower left-hand table, button min raises. We're going to go ahead and defend with this particular hand. We're going to defend it for a call against that small size. There's a lot less reward out there for us to go ahead and 3-bet, so we just go ahead and defend that for a call. And we'll check range. Upper left-hand table, mid 3x open rather from the under the gun player. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet the pocket kings in the middle position. Upper right-hand table, we're just going to go ahead and stab at this limp blind on blind pot. Lower left-hand table, we get a limp from the cutoff. We'll go ahead and complete our small blind with Queen 7 suited. The recreational player, he's gone now, so it's no longer relevant, but he called us down with pocket threes. A lot of times it's good to see what kind of hands they call you with so you get a read on how these guys are playing, and you can adjust to exploit them later on if they stayed. He left the table, so that's trivia at this point. Lower left-hand table, we have top pair on the flush draw. The limped pot checks around on the flop. We're going to go ahead and put in our small 1/3 bet into the multi-way pot on the turn. Upper right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and complete the small blind with the short stack cutoff limping. And we'll check range on the ace-deuce-10 rainbow flop. And we'll go ahead and check fold even against the min bet without too much except for some backdoor draws in our hand. Lower left-hand table, recreational player limps middle position. We'll go ahead and isolate him from the button. Use something like a cutoff raise first in range at mid to upper 20% range to isolate with here seems appropriate. Limper calls. We get a 10-king ace two-tone flop. 2 diamonds. We do have the nut diamond card in our hand, the queen of diamonds. So we're going to go ahead and put in a small range bet. Get quickly called. Turn is the 8 of diamonds. That's a great card for us to check back here as we've got second pair of the nut flush draw. We want to keep bluffing some queen of diamonds and check back others. The queen of diamonds with the king with short on value but no reason to value bet is a prime candidate for a check back. He leads into a 6 into about 15, leads into a small. We've got second pair, gut shot, nut flush draw. Nothing to do but go ahead and call that, evaluate the river. And he bets into us for half pot. Let me think about this one for a little bit. We know he's a recreational player. That half pot tends to be a little bit overly bluffy. Let's see, however, that weird check call donk donk line, not necessarily over or under bluff. That's pretty neutral. An ace-high flop is a bit less bluffy. A flush closing turn is a bit less bluffy. But the problem is that size is just so over-bluffed. I think we have to go ahead and call this down here. We'll see a lot of ace-x, but I think we just have no choice but to go ahead and call down. Maybe some merit into trying to bluff raise the guy off an ace as well. I think I'm content to just take my showdown here instead, though. And end up with the flush. Given the sizing, the fact that he's a rec, the pot odds that we're given, we've got diamond blockers in our hands. I think that's a reasonable hand to call down with. We only have to be good about 1 time out of 4 there for that to break even. And the bluff raise most certainly would have not worked, given that he was on the second nuts, the jack high flush there. Lower right-hand table, we raise blind down blind with 10-8 offsuit. We check range to the big blind after he called us on the Jack 10-6 two-tone flop. We get a queen of diamonds on the turn. We're going to go ahead and start stabbing at this pot small. We've got third pair. We've got a gut shot. Not a particularly strong hand, but still one that's probably better to bet small as opposed to check and possibly get blown off it by a larger bet. I often keep betting these marginal value hands on the river. However, I don't really think he folds anything, even a jack. Everything on the board beats us, queens, jacks, sixes. I don't think he's going to turn misdraws into bluffs often enough to punish us. I'm going to go ahead and just check this and hope to get it to showdown. If I thought there was some reason to think the hand would be good more often when I bet, I might just bet to sort of block it. He goes and he makes a small bet, about 40% of pot. That's pretty bluffy. The check call bet line a little under bluffed. Flush closing river a little under bluffed. 3 Broadway turn with the low river. Also trends a bit under bluffed. However, the sizing is so small, I think I just have to make a pot odds call down here. Once again, I don't think this is going to be good very often, but it was kicked him off there with the busted straight draws. So, you know, given the fact that that sizing is so heavily over bluffed and the pot odds are so good, that's why I'm making these calls. Not expecting to be good a ton of the time, but, you know, that winning call right there just paid off the next several of those situations where I'm giving up a little small amount of little cheap, thin value he's going for. I think we can also go ahead and tag this guy as a recreational player, playing 56-33 over 9 hands on the short stack. That's the biggest data point. So it looks like we have Rex to our immediate left and right on this table. Upper right-hand table, I'll go ahead and tag this guy as a rec, playing on the short stack. Same thing with the 5-seat. Player to my right, he's cold called a few times. Let's see, once in the small blind, once in the big blind. We'll keep an eye on him. Potential recreational player, but nothing we're completely convinced of yet. The upper left-hand table does not seem to be too fishy. I think we'll shuffle that one out. Lower left-hand table, we've got that player's a rec with his limps and funky play post-flop. The player to our immediate right on 45 blinds is almost certainly a rec as well. We'll check in against the limper in the completer from our big blind with king-9 on that table. Player to my immediate left, also potential rec, but we need to see some more. He could just have a run of cards, and that's why he's been playing loose through the first 2 orbits. And against the bet on this multi-way pot, when you have no real piece of it, we'll just go ahead and play very snug in these multi-way pots, especially with only marginal backdoor type draws. One overcard, some backdoor straight draw type hands. Lower left-hand table, that recreational player opens 3x. He's effectively in middle position. We can go ahead and defend the 3x open with ace-10, near the bottom of our range, but I think it's okay to go ahead and do this, especially a bit shorter where if we're dominated, it doesn't punish us quite as badly. He goes ahead and bets half pot on the 6-5-5 rainbow flop. I think I can actually go ahead and check call this one time with ace high. Pretty close. A fold on the flop isn't the end of the world, but I think check calling is also okay. He probably has a lot of just unpaired high card hands in his range. However, against the second barrel, even for a small barrel, I am just going to go ahead and fold without having any additional sort of backdoor equity come in, no backdoor flush draw, anything like that. Looking for a table with more obvious indicators of recreational players, that is, such as some short stacks. Keep just getting full stack tables. We're going to go ahead and give this one a try for a couple orbits and see how it plays. Just because they're full stack doesn't mean they're inherently good players. Lousy river there as it stacks both of the fish on the same hand at that particular table when this guy was ahead. Upper left-hand table will raise first in from the button with King 4 suited. Get called by the small blind. We're going to go ahead and range bet small on the 10-8-7 rainbow flop. Upper right-hand table, we get the recreational player limps the cutoff. Another one completes the small blind. We're going to go ahead and isolate up with the King Jack off. Queen 10 a little outside the standard opening range for middle position in a 6 max table. Upper right-hand table, recreational player limps under the gun. We get a couple players limping behind, at least one of which we're sure is another recreational player. We're going to go ahead and isolate up against all these limpers. Use a pretty tight range here because of all these limpers out there. Something like our under the gun range, something like a 17-18% raise first in range would be appropriate to isolate with here. Pocket 9 certainly a part of that, and we're happy to try to get pocket 9s in heads up against this rec. Or pick up the pot pre-flop if possible as well. Recreational player limp calls. We'll see about the other two. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind. A rec player limps in. We check behind with 9-3 offsuit. He checks to us, and we're going to go ahead and stab for the minimum a half pot on the Jack 9-7 two-tone flop. 7 is the board pairing turn. You know, pairs the third pair on the flop. We're going to go ahead and check our 9 back at this point. And just look to get towards showdown as inexpensively as possible. He bets into us for 2. Probably going to be something we go ahead and call. Yeah, just given how massively overbluffed that sizing is. We'll go ahead and call that down. We're against King Queen. Reasonable hand for him to have, reasonable hand for him to way to play it, reasonable for us to call it down. Upper right hand table we get let into for full pot. We have middle set. We're just going to go ahead and flat this one time here. A little bit risky with some bad turn cards out there, but I think we want to try to trap these guys and still get it in on most turns. Nice blank of all possible blanks on the turn. We kept the fish in as well. We have about 2/3 pot left. He comes all in after us. We're just going to go ahead and move all in with our middle set. And we're up against top set. That's a cooler, but that's the way it goes. Odd that he plays pocket jacks that way, limping behind and then calling against that pre-flop action. But guess it worked out for him as it let him cooler us. So well played, sir. Lower right-hand table, we raise blind on blind, 6-5 suited, check range on the Jack 6-4, rainbow flop. We'll go ahead and check call middle pair against a small bet. Check again on that 3, giving us the open-ended straight draw. Upper right-hand table, recreational player limps middle position. We're going to go ahead and isolate with the pocket jacks. We're going to keep checking our pair of 6s over here on the lower right-hand table. Recreational player comes along for the 4.5x, as does the original limper. Upper left-hand table, we get a short stack limper. We're going to go ahead and isolate him up from the button with ace-4 suited. Upper right-hand table, we're going to check back with our jacks on the ace-ace-jack, or ace-ace-queen flop, rather. Upper left-hand table, we get that king 6-5 rainbow flop. We'll range bet small against that player that limp called pre-flop. He instantly min raises us. We've got various backdoor draws and an overcard, and it's only a min raise. We only have to put 3 into 19, so we're going to go ahead and float this and reevaluate. Not going to put too much more money in unless we actually get something good for us on the turn. But I think it's too good a price to go ahead and fold out. We can't overfold out for the pot size or close to pot size turn jam without improving. Face this little small turn lead. The guy is so loose, I think we can go ahead and call that with the jacks. He can have so much nonsense in his range pre-flop that calls that isolation. He bets 10 into 22. It's a pretty heavily bluff size. The ace-high flop tends to be overbluffed, but the paired flop does not. You know, a check bet line from a fish, That also tends to be fairly neutral. This may be another pot odds call down type spot. We're going to lose to some ace X and some queen X for sure, but the odds are so good. This particular type of player, 88-7, probably has all kinds of silly nonsense in his range. Pre-flop, I think we have no choice but to go ahead and call based on the odds we're given. And we run up against king 4 offsuit. Our hand is good. Upper left-hand table, we raise ace 9 in the cutoff. And then when we get 3-bet, we can just go ahead and lay that down. Can tag the 2-seed here as a recreational player. He's limped. He's on a short stack. I've seen enough. Lower right-hand table, we want to isolate against this limper with something like a low 20% range. Jack 10 probably just outside that, but it is pretty close. Upper right-hand table, we have the cutoff raise first in. The recreational player calls from the small blind. We're going to go ahead and squeeze with our ace-king offsuit. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps the button. We'll check in with our king 7 suited and check range on the king queen 7 two-tone flop, looking to check raise him. He checks back. We get an offsuit 10 on the turn. We're going to go ahead and start jabbing at that pot now out of position. Quickly calls. We get an 8. We're going to go ahead and try to get some more value out of this. We're going to go ahead and bet roughly 2/3 type size on the river with our kings up, and he instantly folds. Lower left-hand table, we're going to raise queen 9 suited from under the gun. Potential recreational player in the 6th seat playing on a short stack or a sub-100 blind stack at least. Upper left-hand table will raise blind down blind with the king 5 suited. Suspected wreck in the big blind playing 50 blinds deep. On this 6th seat over here, he may have just been short stack because he didn't reload correctly between hands. So this table doesn't seem too fishy as of yet. But yeah, we played at it before, but even since we came back, the guys aren't limping or doing anything wacky. We're going to shuffle that one out and look to replace it again. Lower right-hand table, we have a blind down blind situation. We'll raise with a hand like 10-8 offsuit. That's towards the bottom, right on the cusp of a raise first in range here, but it's a reasonable hand to do it with. Against the 3-bet, however, that's no move but other than just go ahead and quickly fold. Lower left-hand table, the player raises the cutoff first in. We're in the small blind. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet with a 10 or 11% 3-bet range, something like pocket 7s plus ace-queen and king-queen, ace-king offsuit, suited broadways, a few suited 9s, a few suited wheel aces. Pocket jacks very clearly in there. In the lower right-hand table, 8-7 suited. It's a fine hand to raise first in from the cutoff. Get 3-bet in position to about 3x size. And defend reasonably wide for being out of position against the 3-bet in this particular formation. But a hand like 8-7 suited can still go ahead and fold. Probably do something like 10s plus ace-king to stack off with, mix in a few bluffs. Call most of my suited Broadway cards, my suited mid pairs, and maybe a few low suited connectors to give me a decently wide range so I'm not folding too much, and also give me a lot of board coverage so I can have strong hands on pretty much every possible flop. If you think the player's tighter, you can adjust your 4-bet range accordingly and only stack off with queens plus ace-king or jacks plus ace-king, and maybe start calling a few less suited Broadway cards and a few less of those middle pairs. Maybe dump the low suited connectors as well if they're particularly tight. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise first in with the ace-9 suited on the cutoff. Upper right-hand table, we'll check range three-handed with the player in position on the ace-3 deuce two-tone flop. Turn is a second ace, putting a backdoor flush draw up there. If it checks to us again, we're going to put a small bet into this, using the small bet because of the multi-way nature of that pot. Deny equity from random overcards like 8-9 type hands that have, clean outs over our 3, but don't want to put any money in. Also acts as a semi-bluff. We're drawing to primarily the 4. I guess the 3 is not a bad card as well, but we still lose to trip aces. But we're going to go ahead and bet now that it comes to us again on the turn using that small bet. And we fold out the button. Small blind calls us. We get the 10 of spades. Not much sense in trying to fold him off trips or a full house or a flush that he hit. We've got showdown value. I'm going to be planning to check this back. If he checks to me, not going to try to really bluff him off anything better. I guess you could fold out some pocket pairs that are better than my pair of 3s with another river bet. But I'm going to beat all those, bricked 4x or 5x or club draws that don't have a pair. So I'm content to check this down. We actually were against Jack Deuce, a weaker pair than we held. Lower right-hand table, get a 2.5x open on the button. We can go ahead and defend with all of our suited jacks. Oh, actually, no, we got 3-bet there as well by the small blind. I almost didn't see that, but I'm glad I did before I click call because we obviously don't want to be cold calling the 3-bet, especially not with a hand like Jack 3. So we just fold. Once we have that the 3-bet go in there and we haven't put any money in yet except for our big blind, we're going to be playing that scenario as a cold 4-bet or fold. Can probably be pretty loose given the loose formation. I can probably stack off as wide as pocket 10s plus an ace-king, and then mix in some bluffs, probably about a 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluffs to go along with that. A hand like Jack 3, nowhere near the range of hands they're going to voluntarily put any money into that pot in that particular scenario. Lower right-hand table, blind down blind, we can bring in the 10-8 offsuit for a raise first in. Upper left-hand table, the rec limps the button, but we get an isolation raise out of the small blind, so we can just cut out of the way with our Jack Deuce suited. Lower right-hand table, we get a 2.5x open from middle position. Waiting to see what the cutoff does, but we're going to be either 3-betting or 4-betting here based on the options given to us when it becomes our turn to act. Cutoff folds out, so we're just going to go ahead and play a 3-bet or fold range here against the middle position raise first in player. Something like a 10% range. 9s plus suited broadways, ace-jack plus, king-queen, and a couple suited wheel aces should get us there. Same scenario, or almost the same scenario at least. We're in the cutoff, facing the middle position, raise first in. 10-9 suited just outside my 3-betting range. So we'll go ahead and fold that. Lower right-hand table, we're raising first in from the cutoff with king-jack suited. We get 3-bet in position 3x. I believe that player has been doing that. He did that last orbit to us. This is his third 3-bet out of 5 attempts. Hand like King Jack can be a standard defense out of position here for a call. Both the GTO world, even against the regs who are slightly tighter, I think I would defend Queen Jack for a call. So nothing too nuanced about the pre-flop decision. I think this is a pretty clear call. If we thought the guy was particularly passive, which we don't, maybe we could fold it. But I think this is going to be a standard call, both in solver world and against the regs in the pool. Get an ace-4, ace-5-4, two-tone flop. We could have 5-4 suited. We could have 6-7 for an open-ended straight draw. We can have some ace-x type hands. I block his ace-king, his ace-jack. I've got backdoor flush draws, backdoor gut shots. I'm going to go ahead and put in a check raise against this guy here, thinking he may have far too many hands in his range that can't call. If I think he's sufficiently aggressive on the button, that would lean in towards that, him not having a ton of ace-x in his range. He could have lots of, mid pairs, suited connectors, suited Broadway type cards that just can't continue. And I do have some removal to some of the better aces in his pre-flop 3-bot range, specifically ace-queen, or I'm sorry, not ace-queen, but specifically ace-king and ace-jack. So I think going ahead and putting the check raise in there, knowing that I've got some backdoor club draws, some of them that even give me some club draws plus some gut shots to continue barreling with, I think that's a reasonable hand to check raise with. But the primary reason for why that's an acceptable play, even though I don't have any immediate equity, is going to be because I think this guy, I have some reason to believe his range is sufficiently wide there because he's been 3-betting the button and 3-betting pre-flop fairly aggressively so far. Small sample, but enough that at least gives me some idea the guy's not being a total nit. It's possible he just happened to pick up aces and ace-king 3 times already in the first 2-3 orbits. But I think it's probably more likely he's just playing aggressively, which means he's got hands that can't stand up to a check raise in that spot. So I go ahead and put a check raise in, and I end up taking the pot down there. Upper left-hand table, we're going to raise first in from the cutoff. Actually, now it's the button with the player quickly leaving with ace-deuce suited. This lower right-hand table, not a great table, especially with the player that we think is kind of aggressive in position to us as well. So I think I'm going to be looking to move that one out. Upper left-hand table, we go ahead and range bet small on the 6-6-3 rainbow flop and take it down quickly. Upper right-hand table, 6-4 suited in the cutoff, a little too loose to open. Some players would do it. I prefer to play a little more fundamentally sound pre-flop and more closer follow solver ranges and frequencies. If you think the players aren't 3-betting enough, making silly mistakes post-flop, et cetera, and you want to expand your range, I'm not going to put up much of a fight or argument against that. I think that's reasonable. But I tend to try to keep my ranges a bit more fundamentally sound in the earlier streets and get more and more exploitive than later in the game tree we go. That recreational player on the upper left-hand table appears to have left. We do have a new player playing 30 blinds deep to our immediate left, so we'll stick around and see how he shows himself to be. But the fish are dropping out. We may have to find some new tables here. Weak straight draw on this table in the upper left-hand table, but it did check through on the flop. I'm not going to put any money into this with a gut shot to the low end. The high end of my double gutter is going to make a four to the straight, of which I have the low end of that as well. So I can just go ahead and fold when somebody else shows any desire for this pot. Had it checked to me, I might have stabbed small on that turn and probably followed through if I whiffed on the river as well as a bluff. But with somebody else showing some desire to get involved in the pot, it's easier to just get out of the way multi-way and play hands that are more likely to either have strong equity or strong hands that have strong equity either because they're strong themselves right now or they're drawing to very strong hands that will be good. There I would have hit my 7 for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but any 9x beats me, so I've got the low end to the 4-card straight, not that strong a draw. And he was limping queens under the gun, then he you know, did not bet it out. Did not bet it out there against a couple of blind players and a 10 high flop. So I think we can safely go ahead and call that guy a recreational player. We get it looks like a poster, but we're going to go ahead and isolate him up out of the small blind with pocket eights towards the bottom of our isolation range, but a very reasonable hand to do it with, especially if he posted as opposed to limp where it wasn't even voluntary. When he goes ahead and 3-bets me up small for about a third of his stack, the only real move is going to be all in or fold, and I think a hand like pocket eights we can just go ahead and fold. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind. We get a 3x open. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet with Jack Deuce suited. I'd like to put a few of these small, janky suited cards, you know, into my 3-betting range. Just, I don't want to call them all. A few of them work as 3-bet bluffs. I get 4-bet, and so I can, of course, go ahead and fold the Jack Deuce versus the 4-bet. But I think it's okay to 3-bet a few of those kind of small 2x suited cards there against the blind on blind open. Don't play a ton of heads up, but a player sitting with the half stack is probably a pretty weak player, so we'll see if he'll give us some action and how this table develops from there. Lower right-hand table, we fold King 7 on the button against a cutoff raise first in, especially for a 3x size. Lower left-hand table, the half stack limps his button heads up, so we'll just check in with the ace-7 offsuit. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise the cutoff first in with King 6 suited. He checks back the flop, so we're going to go ahead and start stabbing the turn now. And the Queen 5, 4, 4. River is the king of spades. We don't have any real piece of that. I think I'd rather bluff this than try to show down ace high, so that's what I'm going to do. Put a follow-up bet in on the river. He quickly folds, and we pick up the pot. Upper left-hand table, we're going to check range to the in-position player on the ace-jack-7 rainbow flop. Lower left-hand table, we're going to raise heads up on our button with 10-6 suited. He min-bets. We've got king high, backdoor heart draw. I'm just going to go ahead and check call this, evaluate the turn. Lower left-hand table, he limps his button. We'll check in with ace-6. We continue checking the upper left-hand table when that king peels off on the turn. We now have second pair, no real kicker, but against a min bet, we'll go ahead and check call again. And we're going to continue checking the river. The river's another ace, which is good, and that is harder for him to have the ace that beats us. He checks back this time. He had queen 7, and our king is good. We min-bet the turn over there, but we go ahead and get raised up. I'm going to go ahead and give the guy credit until he shows that he is actually raising those small bets aggressively. This is just the player pool in general is not. Just part of what makes them very useful. We're going to raise king 8 on the button in the heads-up table. Upper left-hand table, get a 3x open, blind on blind. We're going to go ahead and use our ace-3 offsuit as a 3-bet. I like to put a couple of my weak offsuit aces into the 3-bet bluff range pre-flop. I usually use ace-3 and ace-deuce, though I will mix it up from time to time. Pretty much I just like to use a couple of suited cards and a couple of off-suited combos that just aren't quite good enough to call pre-flop. You know, hands just outside the calling range as my 3-bet bluffing range. Now he donks into us for half pot on ace, deuce, deuce. I've got king high. I can float this at least once. I'm not going to start putting a ton of money into increased pressure from this player. I'll just continue trapping with my ace-x or my trip deuce type hands if I have them. But I will float one bet on the flop there with king high on that paired board. He continues betting, so I'll just go ahead and get out of the way at this point. But he is taking some weird lines, so you know, coupled with the fact that he's playing in a half stack, my assessment that he's probably a recreational player is probably accurate. Upper left-hand table, we raise first in with the ace-8 offsuit. We get called by a rec player in the small blind, an ace-10-10 two-tone flop. We will go ahead and range bet small. Turn is the queen of clubs. We have king high, no real draw, but we're just going to go ahead and stab at this out of position as he hasn't bet the flop either. And see if he continues folding too much. It's the second time he's raised our turn min bet, so we're going to keep that in mind, that perhaps this is a player that is responding aggressively to those min bets, or at least the small bets, not always min bets, but small bets. We'll fold this time with only king high, but keep an eye on the situation. Now, lower left-hand table, we get ace-queen suited against him in the heads-up spot. We'll, of course, raise that first in. He folds out. Another player had joined us, but he goes and he leaves instead. So I'm still heads up with the rec. He again limps his button. This time I'm going to raise up and isolate out of my big blind with ace-king offsuit. He calls. We get a king-6-4 two-tone flop, so I'm going to go ahead and range bet that small. And he folds out this time. Lower right-hand table, we're going to raise first in from the button with Jack-10 suited. Lower right-hand table, or lower left-hand table, 9-4 offsuit, we'll just fold from our button. We will fold a few hands heads up. 9-4 doesn't have a ton going for it. We can dump that one. Most hands will play 80 to 90%, but we can fold a few, and that's one of our weakest possible pre-flop holdings. Raise first in from the button, lower left-hand table with king-9. We have another player, probably another rec playing 72 blinds deep. He calls us from the big blind. Lower right-hand table, we raise the pocket threes first in from the cutoff. Lower left-hand table, 10-8-6 two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. We've got a gut shot and an overcard. We hit our overcard. We hit our king. I'm going to be using overbets or check ranges here. I'm going to be overbetting the king with the gut shot. I want to see how much of an overbet I need. I want to be using roughly geometric if my 150% bet's a bit too large. If I bet 150%, my standard for this size, that would make a pot of 37 on the river with 54 behind. That's about an appropriate size, so we'll go ahead and put the overbet in. He quickly folds out. Another player joins. This player is sitting 32.5 blinds. Another player joins sitting 30 blinds. These are very likely all to be recreational players joining the table. Another guy to our immediate left playing 100 deep. He's less likely to be rec. But the table looks pretty promising based on these other four guys so far. The guy we were playing heads up with, once again, open limps his button. We're going to go ahead and isolate up from our small blind, or from our big blind. The small blind fold that we are going to raise up from our big blind with H plus, Ace 10, King Queen plus, King Jack plus, suited broadways, suited nines, hands like that, a 12-13% range. Ace King offsuit, of course, very clearly a hand we want to be isolating a recreational button limper with. A couple of posters, and the rec raises for the first time, 5x. So we're going to go ahead and fold with Queen 3, but keep an eye on what these guys are playing. These two short stacks also both posted out of their big blind, and then this one also called the 5x open. I'm expecting some shenanigans in this hand already based on everything I've seen. We'll see if they continue doing silly things on the later streets. Upper right-hand table, we raise first in from the button with 6-7 of diamonds. He checks to us after defending his big blind, and on the Ace-8-4 two-tone flop, we'll range bet small. We've got a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw to bail us out if we get some continues. However, he just folds to us. And the rec had pocket 10s, so he did have a pretty solid hand to raise with there. He's played 70-10 so far, raising one hand and limping the other 6. I think it's probably pretty safe to say that's the kind of player that will telegraph the strength of his pre-flop holdings based on his pre-flop action, only raising a handful of stronger hands and limping all kinds of other stuff. Useful knowledge from when we play against this guy, trying to put him on ranges that we can exploit him and get him to do things we want him to do. as we get into situations where we have the cards to do it. This guy used a reg type sizing to open to 2.5x, but he is playing on a short stack. I don't have a ton of faith that he's a good player based on the short stack, but we'll keep an eye and see what kind of hands he's playing before we jump to any conclusions. Another player here playing on a short stack. He had a bunch of money in the pot with 6-5 suited without having much money behind him to justify any kind of implied odds for the hand hitting the board hard. I'm comfortable this guy's a weak player. This guy's playing 33-17 with 10% limps over 19 hands. Only one limp out of 10 opportunities, so not limping a ton. Or where is he putting money in? Once in the big blind, once from early position, once from the button without a raise. He's got limps and calls all over in various formations. I think this guy's probably a weak player combined with the fact that he's on a short stack. Lower right-hand table does not seem to be very fishy. We'll go ahead and shuffle that one out. Everyone seems to be playing reg types, frequencies and stack sizes. Upper left-hand table, only one suspected rec to our immediate left, so not a great table there either. But we'll shuffle out the one that's most obviously a poor table first, and we'll move along to replacing this one, perhaps after that. $2.5x open from under the gun on the upper right-hand table. We're in the big blind. No need to defend with the hand as weak as 7-3 suited, so we'll just go ahead and fold that. We get a button limp from this player who's a rec, and then we get a small raise out of the small blind from the player who we're not so sure of as of quite yet. He uses a 1/3 pot sizing on the flop that also tends to be more indicative of a reg player than a fish. So this guy's throwing me mixed signs so far. Not sure what to make of him yet. Upper right-hand table, we'll raise first in, blind on blind with Queen 9 offsuit. And then we'll check range on the Ace 8 deuce two-tone flop. Upper left-hand table is interesting. We get a recreational player limping, and then we get an isolation raise to 5x from middle position. We're in our big blind. Given that we don't close the action, I kind of want to be playing 3-bet or fold here. And for that particular size and against a player that's particularly tight, I really don't want to start getting a bunch of money in the pot with 9s pre-flop. Even for hands that want to 3-bet and fold to a jam, I've got better candidates. I'm going to go ahead and make a very tight fold and fold 9s in this formation. Upper right-hand table, we bet the turn and he calls. I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and bet this to try to get some thin value from worse 9x or 8x type hands that call me down. I'm going to bluff so often there on that line as well. I want to have a bit of extra value as well. I think that's better than trying to put myself in a spot where I'm deciding if I need to be bluff catching or not. Upper right-hand table, we have a blind on blind spot. We can go ahead and fold, especially against the short stack with 4-3 suited. And then we get a 3x open from under the gun. We don't need to 3-bet him with a hand like Ace 3 suited. Ace 5 suited have a wheel ace, or maybe even 2 of them in there I might do. Ace 3 suited I'll just put in the fold range. Lower left-hand table, we raise first in from the button with aces. We get the recreational player calls his small blind. It is a 10-6-4 rainbow flop. He checks to us, so we're going to go ahead and put in our small range bet on that board. Upper left-hand table, we have a Jack 9 rainbow flop. The small blind min bets into us. We're going to go ahead and just float that with the ace high. Could also put in a small raise and treat that min bet like a fancy check. Turn is the offsuit deuce on the lower left-hand table. Going to go ahead and continue betting my aces for value. I think if I go about 12, just keep calling that min bet with ace high. Go about 13.5. Make the river pot about 36. He'd have about 46 behind for me to just overbet jam all in with my overpair. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise first end of the gun with ace-9 suited. Upper right-hand table, get a 3x open from the cutoff. We've got ace-10 offsuit in our big blind, which we can go ahead and defend that for a call, and we'll check range on the king-3 deuce two-tone flop. Lower right-hand table, we get called by the recreational player in position in both blinds. We're going to go ahead and check our range with a multi-way pot with players in position to us on king-10-4 monotone board. It checks through. We get a nice card for our hand, the ace of hearts. We're going to fold ace-10 even against a small bet without any kind of real backdoors. With the ace of hearts, I'm continuing one way or another, but without anything, I can just go ahead and fold. Lower right-hand table, now we've got top pair. Everyone checked around on the flop. The blinds continued checking on the turn. I'm going to go ahead and bet this using my small bet because of the multi-way nature of the pot. Upper left-hand table, we get a recreational player limps under the gun. The small blind comes along as well. I'm going to go ahead and isolate up with ace-queen in the big blind. He goes ahead and raises our bet. He raises our small bet small again. We've got to call 5 into 20. We're getting 4-1. We have top pair. He's done this a few times already. We're going to go ahead and call this and evaluate the river. We check to him. A queen is on the river, puts a 4 straight out there on the board. Just going to continue checking, try to show this down. He had king-10 for 2 pairs, so I don't mind his turn raise. He really should have bet the flop with a hand like that in the first place, not let me or anybody else outdraw him with the board being coordinated like that. But he's a recreational player, so he's going to do weird things that don't always make sense, and that's fine by us. And he's been aggressive raising that small turn bet after flops checked through in the past, so I'm not going to be giving it a ton of credence or credit when he does that again and we're actually holding top pair. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we can raise the queen deuce suited. Lower right-hand table, we get limps all over the place. 2 limps in position. 3 limps in position and the small blind completes. We're going to go ahead and isolate against all these limpers with that standard pre-flop isolation raise. 8s or 9s plus, suited Broadway, suited 9x, ace-10 offsuit, king-jack offsuit plus. Pocket queens, of course, being a part of that. Go ahead and put in a nice 150% pot size raise to either pick up this money immediately or start making people put in a bunch of money pre-flop against our strong range. Everybody folds out and we take it down. The 6-seat flashes sunglasses at us like he thinks we might be getting out of line, perhaps. He did not post, he limped. So we're going to go ahead and tag him as a recreational player because limping is not something we expect to see very often from players that are serious regulars. So when we see that, we're pretty sure that it is not what he is. 3x open from that fishy player. Small blind. We're going to play 3-better fold. Queen 8 suited, very easy fold. This newer table here, the lower left-hand side, the 3-seat playing 76 blinds deep was the most likely player to be the spot. He sat out, but he didn't leave. Maybe he's coming back. We'll stick around to see if he does or if these guys show themselves to be weak. Upper right-hand table, we're in middle position. It folds to us. We have King 5 suited, probably just outside my open range. I tend to open King 6 or better and fold King 5 or worse from that spot. It's pretty close, though. These hands on the cusp usually can go one way or the other. And especially if, as long as you're keeping your raise first in frequency, is pretty reasonable. If you start mixing up which ones go in there, folding certain hands I would raise and raising certain hands I would fold, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. I think it's more important to get your frequencies reasonable, as long as the shape of your raise first in range or the combos you decide to raise or to fold are reasonably chosen. The exact ones you pick probably won't make a big difference on your win rate. Okay, and the player that's playing short did come back. It looks like he posted his dead blinds as well, so I'm happy to see that, as I think he's likely to be a weak player. Upper left-hand table, recreational player limps middle position, and everyone else folds except for us in our big blind. We check in, we check range to him on the 8-7-3, rainbow flop, and we'll check call against the min bet with our second pair. Continue checking on that 10 turn. This guy is the guy that's been making lots of weird min bets with all sorts of pieces. He could easily have an 8x or, a hand like 10-jack, 10-9 that made a better pair on that turn. But for the price we're getting, the fact that he could be doing this with worse hands as well, I'm just going to check and continue calling these bets that are giving me a great price. River, he goes and bets 5 into 6. He bets a bit larger. This actually makes the decision a bit tougher. Against a small bet, the odds are so good we just automatically call that and don't think twice about it. Fish sizing up to about pot and an in-position called pot. That's slightly over bluff, but the bet line less so. Pretty close. I guess this deck qualifies as a bluff catcher. I just don't know that he finds the bluffs here. I think this is a pretty neutral spot. Could go one way or the other. Probably not a ton of value in either decision. And the fact that the board was a low board staying low, that's often overbluffed. I'm actually going to go ahead and call this. It's close either way. Oh, and he hit his straight. Okay. The size up was the only real clue against calling that down. I think it's some factors going both ways. Those low boards that stay 10 high, they often end up being overbluffed by lots of players, Fish in particular. He did go bet, which tends to be underbluff, but he was min betting, so I'm not going to give that nearly as much credence as I usually would either. I think that's a pretty close spot overall. Probably not a ton of value in either direction. Lower left-hand table, get a 3x open on the button. We are in the big blind with 6-9 suited. Be kind of a fringy defense against a standard button open player. This guy might be on the passive side, given that he's fishy, playing a bit shorter stacked. I'm going to make a slightly tight fold and go ahead and lay this down. For a smaller sizing, I would come along. If I was more sure the player, was particularly weak or looser and not passive, I think I would come along as well. I think that's okay to fold though, but pretty close. This is a weird spot here. The guy's been passive and he's also short stacked. I'm going to be playing this to bet and either get in against jams or not because of the smaller size. I'm not going to give him credit for being able to 4-bet small. I want to go about a 50-50 ratio of value bets to bluffs. I'm going to be stacking off queens plus ace king. I can put king jack suited in my range of hands that re-raises and folds if he jams over the top. He goes ahead and calls instead, and I get a king 8 deuce two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and range bet that small, and I'm going to be planning to stack off with my pair of kings under most scenarios. He goes ahead and check calls. Turn is a great card for me in that it pairs up. You know, if I was somehow behind a hand like aces that he was trapping with, I guess it's not that great a card. Ace is the only hand I really pull ahead of in that spot. But now, given that I've got trip kings, there's double flush draw out there, pot size bet left, I think the only move is just go ahead and put all this in, try to get called down by worse. He quickly calls me with ace 3 of spades for the naked flush draw. The ace is no longer a clean out. Now let's see, 2.5x open, blind on blind. We're going to go ahead and use our ace deuce as a 3-bet against this player. We're going to go ahead and value bet our trip jacks on the lower right-hand table as well. Recreational player, he goes ahead and quickly calls jack 7-3 two-tom. We're going to go ahead and put in our small range bet and try to pick this pot up. He quickly calls me. We get a board pairing turn, the jack on the turn. No reason to keep barreling. I want to keep barreling with hands with some equity. I feel like gut shots or flush draws. I've got some 10-9, some 9-8 in my range, also some 6-5 and some 5-4. I can also have a lot of trip jacks, all sorts of trip jacks in my range. I'm going to go ahead and check back the ace deuce. Maybe bluff catch if I river an ace. It's actually a decent river for my hand now that it's double paired board and my ace high is good against everything except pocket pairs or cards that paired up with the board. Was planning to bluff this on a lot of rivers, but given that this river makes my hand relatively strong, I'm just going to go ahead and check it down. The auto folds I beat anyway, those gut shots that didn't come in. Okay, pocket nines is probably never folding either. I think that's okay to go ahead and take the showdown value in that double paired board spot. Recreational player goes ahead and limps the button. We'll complete our small blind with 6-5 suited. Upper right-hand table will raise first in with the deuces. We're going to check range out of our small blind on that king jack 5 two-tone multi-way board. We're going to check range to the in position caller on the king 10-4 monotone board on the upper right-hand table. Lower left-hand table, it checks around. We're going to start stabbing with our fourth pair here. In position player checks back in the upper right-hand table, so we're going to start stabbing now with our deuce. Deuce is a pretty good card for us on the river as we make an underfool. Now beats any kind of trap flop flushes. We get called by one player in position. River is the jack. I think I've got no choice but to go ahead and continue bluffing with my fifth pair here. So I'll put the bet in on the river, try to fold him off weak one pair hands that still beat me. He quickly folds. And we're going to shuffle out this upper right-hand table with no obvious recreational players. The player on the button's playing kind of loose, but he's also calling a lot as opposed to 3-betting, but not enough to give away that he's a weak or especially not a particularly weak player. Nobody else there seemed too far out of whack. To the extent that guy's stats seemed out of whack, it could very well just be a small sample size misleading us. So I'm just going to go ahead and look around for better seats. Upper right-hand table, got a 2.5x open on the button. We don't need to defend with the hand as weak as 7-3 suited for that size. It's kind of on the cusp, but I'll go ahead and fold it. I think it's full loose to defend with. Upper left-hand table, blind on blind, we'll raise into the recreational player with 10-7 of spades. We'll go ahead and check to him on the 7-6-6 two-tone flop. He quickly checks back. It's a 4 on the turn. We've got top pair. We're going to want to go ahead and bet that for value or at least some equity denial. So we're going to go ahead and start jabbing at that turn on the small side. River is the ace. I think I'd rather bet this and try to get some value out of weird 4x type hands, even though I'll be value cutting myself against some ace high type stuff. And I don't want to put myself in a spot where I check and I'm trying to decide if I need to bluff catch or not. So I think it's going to be better played just as a kind of mergy value bet on the river, especially against a fishy player that just might start calling down with hands you don't necessarily expect. And just to be clear, even though I think that guy, is fishy and may call down the river with hands he shouldn't necessarily call down with, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop bluffing him. I'm going to have all kinds of bluffs that can still get hands to fold out, and I can also, I'm not going to adjust against a player who I think might be loose, passive, and continuing too wide by not bluffing, because I still have hands that just absolutely want to and need to bluff. I'm going to adjust against that guy by looking to start value betting thinner and thinner, in that he probably doesn't find the appropriate bluffs, so trapping is less valuable. He probably doesn't really bluff raise me enough on the river as well to punish me for making those thinner value bets. So that's the way I'm going to adjust to a player who's perceived to be playing the way I think a shorter stack 64-0 loose passive fishy kind of player is playing. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and raise first in from middle position with the ace-king. Our original buddy from that table looks like he busted. I didn't see what happened. I was involved discussing other hands, but he looks like he may be out. But there's still plenty of other wrecks at this table for us to have a good time with. So we raise first in. We get called in two spots by both the blinds, the small blind and the big blind. We get a queen jack 6 two-tone flop. We get bet into a little less than half pot bet. We've got two overcards. We've got the heart blocker and backdoor flush draw. We've also got the gut shot to the nuts. You don't need to defend real wide multi-way even against these smaller bets, but just given that these guys both seem to be weak fishy players, I've got overcards and nut type draws. I'm going to go ahead and float him here at least one time. We get called in one spot by the other recreational player on the small blind, so we're still multi-way. We face another small bet, 4 into 16. We're getting, we have to call 4 into 20 at that point, so we're getting 5-1 in our call. I'm going to continue calling right here, expecting that my ace or king is often good. And then upper left-hand table, we raise the cutoff first in with ace-9 offsuit, get called in both spots. And now this player goes ahead and he bets 3. This player just called. He could have all kinds of weak stuff in his range. I have the flush blocker. He's betting very, very small, which doesn't signify strength. I'm going to go ahead and put in a bluff raise in this spot here, bluff raise in for pot, and try to take this away. That really small river block bet does not signify strength to me. I'm not in the business of bluff raising fish very often, but when he just takes a line that implies his range is so wide and has so many weak hands, and when this player doesn't go ahead and lead on the river multi-way, it's not guaranteed he would do it, but he would do it some percentage of the time. I'm just not that worried about anybody having a strong hand, like making the flush as played. And I also have a flush blocker to go along with it. And just the main factor, of course, is my read that these ranges are wide and weak and not going to really have the heart to hold up to a strong bet there. And I do need to do more research on the pool, how it responds to river raises, and really start figuring out in what scenarios I want to make river bluff raises and what ones I don't. But for now, for some very obvious spots like that, I've got good removal, and their ranges are almost certainly wide and weak. I think I'll pick a few spots like that in the meantime to do it. Interesting spot here on the turn in that the under the gun player limps, and then the flop checks through. He doesn't bet it. It is a monotone flop. On the turn, we get a 6, which completes the straight, which we have with our 8-7 offsuit. We bet small. He goes ahead and puts a, let's see, he bets another 5.1 to 6 point. That's a pretty decent size raise. I've got the straight. This guy could be overplaying a hand. I'm going to go ahead and call this and evaluate the river. Check to him again. If he bets big, I can probably find a fold here. But I'm going to think about it, see if he bets, how large he bets, and make my decision from there. Let's see. Now, if he's betting in position as the preflop caller, that sizing tends to be fairly overbluffed. The check raise bet line, however, undoes a lot of that overbluffing. That tends to be underbluffed. And the monotone flop also trends underbluffed. I think he probably is a bit short on bluffs here. The only question is he doing this with worse value? This is pretty close. He could have all kinds of flop flushes, but he could be overplaying an ace-x type hand here, and he does seem to be a bit wacky and fishy. It's close. I'm going to be showing a flush some percentage of the time here, but I am going to go ahead and bluff catch this. And he does have the flush, but I think it's worth reasoning through it. I don't think it's a slam dunk call, but I think it's probably close enough, just given that fish tend to be pretty bluffy. Even though that check raise bet line is not in and of itself that bluffy, fish themselves tend to be pretty bluffy, especially for bets less than pot. And if I was certain he was never doing that with some kind of set or two pair type hand, I think I could maybe find a fold there. But I just think that given there's a chance the guy could be looking at a hand like ace-9 and thinking it's the nuts there, with his little sunglass emoji and whatnot, or just clicking buttons because that's what he does. I think there's enough rationale to go ahead and call down. Cutoff raises first in 3x. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet from the big blind with about a 10.5% range. 9s plus, ace-queen plus, suited broadways, 10-9 through king-9, a few suited 9s like 9-8, 10-8, jack-8, a few suited 8s, a few suited wheel aces. This hand's kind of on the cusp. I think it's okay to 3-bet, though. King 10-9, rainbow flop. We'll go ahead and range bet small. And we're going to go ahead and isolate these two recreational player limpers in the lower right-hand table with King 10. We're going to use pretty much our middle position raise first in range against a couple of limpers from our button. King 10 right on the cusp towards the bottom of our isolation range, but still reasonable to do it with. Recreational player calls that pretty good size isolation raise from the small blind. Big blind's going in the tank, and he goes ahead and squeezes, so we're going to be completely out of the way on this one. Given that it's a pretty healthy size squeeze, I'm probably not calling very much of anything. I'm just going to be jamming over the top with queens plus ace-king. I could probably talk me into doing it with jacks as well. Hand like king 10 is just going to be an easy fold in this spot, though. Get some weird behavior from this guy, limping, then calling the raise and 3-bet. The upper left-hand table is reg infested at this point, so we're going to go ahead and shuffle that one out. Ace-Jack offsuit, a reasonable hand to squeeze. Maybe slightly loose, but not completely unreasonable. It's not a massive mistake. This fishy player limping then calling the ISO and the 3-bet with Queen-Jack offsuit, of course, is a poor play. The big blind jammed all in with his Ace-Jack, and he got snapped off by the queens that made, Ace-Queen or Queen-Jack that made top pair, but then he outdrew him. So the fish went bust, even though he got his money in good on the flop, and now the fish has quit, which is an unfortunate reaction for us and the rest of the regs at the table who didn't get their hands on that money. But that's the way it goes. Upper right-hand table, we raise middle position first in with pocket tens. We've been called by both in-position players so far. And now we get squeezed up by the small blind. This is not really going to be a spot we can do much of anything except 4-bet all in or go ahead and fold. I think tens is probably a little on the loose side. Queens plus ace-king, the money's going in the middle. Jacks is close. I think I can just fold the tens and not feel too bad about that. This guy hasn't 3-bet yet. He's only had a few opportunities, so that doesn't tell us anything one way or the other. But I think tens is okay to fold there in that spot. I don't really want to be calling for that much money pre-flop with a couple players behind me. They can still call in position or back jam squeeze me off. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we raise the Queen 8 suited. Lower right-hand table, button raises 3x. Recreational small blind player comes along. We'll call the big blind to close the action with pocket fours. And we do get a small 4-bet to 38 back behind, who then folds out the squeezing player. We'll go ahead and check range on the ace-7 deuce two-tone flop in the lower right-hand table. 3x open on the button, we just fold 5-4, the upper left-hand table from our big blind. Flop checks through in the lower right-hand table. The small blind leads small on the 8. That's a flush closing turn. No reason for us to continue with pocket fours, even with the 4 of spades. Upper left-hand table will raise first in with the pocket fives. Upper right-hand table will defend blind on blind with king-jack offsuit. Upper left-hand table, we raise the small blind first in. We get 3-bet by someone who we don't know anything about him except he's playing 100 blinds deep. We'll presume he's a reg without any further reason to think otherwise. Against a 3x 3-bet blind on blind, we defend that pretty liberally out of position, including our pocket pairs like pocket fives, and we check range to him on jack 7-3. Upper right-hand table will float with king-jack high and the deuce-deuce-deuce flop. Lower right-hand table will go ahead and squeeze against the 2.5x under the gun or middle position open and the button recreational player cold call. We'll fold the fives against the continuation bet though in the upper left-hand table. And we'll check back our king high upper right-hand table. Not really looking to fold out any kind of full house or any kind of ace-x. I think I'll just take my short on here on the trip flop with king high, and we end up beating queen high. Lower left-hand table, we get a 3x open on the button. We can defend all of our suited kings in this spot on the big blind, including king deuce suited. We will check range to this player on a queen 9-5 rainbow flop. And then he continuation bets for a pretty healthy size, about 2/3 or at 70% or so, 75%, something like that. We'll just go ahead and fold our king high backdoor flush draw. Against a smaller bet size, we're going to start looking to check raise more liberally with some backdoor draws over card type hands. Given that he used the larger sizing, it's going to be a lot less bluff heavy. It should be more split, first of all, in a theoretical standpoint. And from looking at the player pool's data, they just don't fold the check raises after that sizing nearly as often as they do against the smaller sizing. So we can just go ahead and get out of the way and play more straightforward with our king high backdoor spade draw. On this table, even though we've only got an orbit worth of stats on these new players here for the most part, well, this guy, he's been calling. He called his big blind. That doesn't tell us anything about him playing poorly pre-flop. Lower left-hand table will raise first in from the cutoff with 8-7 suited. I'm going to shuffle out this upper left-hand table. Keep looking for wrecks. They seem pretty short supply at the moment. Our cutoff raised first in, got 3-bet in position. 3x. 8-7 suited is not the kind of hand I really defend with there. I do have a few small suited connectors for board coverage purposes in a 3-bet defense range there, as long as the player is sufficiently aggressive. But I, for the most part, just fold the middle suited connectors. Upper right-hand table, raise first in from the cutoff with most of our suited kings, including King 6 suited. Maybe dump a couple of them like King 3 and King Deuce, but raise the rest. Upper left-hand table will raise first in from middle position with King Queen offsuit. That's a fairly standard open. Interesting in that we get 3-bet by the blind, but very, very small. The price is very good, but a hand like King Queen is a troubled hand to come along with 3 bets, as it just finds itself easily dominated. It doesn't play nearly as well as the suited connectors. Against that kind of sizing, I do call a lot more because the price is so much better. However, the kind of hands I'm calling with are going to be, mid and small pairs and suited Broadway, suited connectors, hands that play well post-flop, not hands that have domination issues. I'm still going to go ahead and fold the King Queen. Maybe closer than I'm giving it credit for against that very small sizing, but I think it's okay to err on the side of caution with these dominated offsuit hands and fold them versus 3 bets, even against small sizings that lay us pretty nice odds to continue. Lower left-hand table, we raise under the gun with pocket tens. Folds to the button, who goes ahead and defends for a call. We also get called by the big blind, so we're multi-way with a player in position to us. I'll be checking range, assuming it checks to me on the King 9-3 two-tone board. Turn is an interesting card as it makes the set for us with that offsuit 10 peeling off, but it does also make the nut straight if somebody's sitting on any combo of Queen Jack. So we're going to go ahead and start betting, assuming our set is good, but knowing that we do not have the nuts and a very reasonable pre-flop hand just also made a hand that is better than ours on that 10 turn. The button goes ahead and flat calls. We get an 8 on the river. I'm going to want to go ahead and continue betting this for value. I don't think he really has a ton of King X in his range, especially not strong King X, even that he checked the flop. I'm not going to overbet here. I'm trying to get called down by worse one-pair hands like King X or weaker hands than that, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a smaller bet, and he instantly folds. He was probably on some sort of draw, like a whip spade draw. Lower right-hand table, we raise first in from middle position with King 7 suited. We get called in position by a rec and also by a big blind player who seems like a reg. We're going to check range with the player in position to us on the Ace-10-9 rainbow flop. A fishy player goes ahead and bets out for half pot. I mean, I've got some backdoor gut shots and backdoor flush draws, but I just don't think I need to continue with the check raise with a hand quite as weak as this when I've got better hands to continue. I've got all sorts of straight draws and gut shot straight draws that are already out there in the flop. Some of them also have the backdoor flush draw. I think I could just go ahead and fold. He's got a hand like ace-x. I'm not going to fold him off that. Lower left-hand table, blind down blind, facing a 3x open. We'll defend with the ace-9 offsuit. We get check 2. We're going to go ahead and stab pretty liberally, more or less with our entire range here on the 7-3-3 rainbow board, and he quickly check folds. The player pool just doesn't seem to defend their check range well enough in that spot, so you can get away with betting hands you probably shouldn't be able to do, at least in theory. Got a new table here. There is a $60 stack, a 30 blind stack to our immediate right, and another one jumps in to seat a couple spots to our left as well. We are shutting down the session pretty soon, so we're definitely just going to take this table and play it out for the rest of our time here. Lower right-hand table, recreational player limps the button. We will complete our small blind with pocket fours. Get an ISO out of a more aggressive rec type player to a 5x. We don't need to call against a 5x size bet though there with our pocket fours, so we will just fold out even with the other player coming along. Recreational player limps middle position. We'll isolate him from the cutoff with something like our middle position raise first in range, including pocket fives. Low 20% isolation raise is reasonable in this spot. Everyone folds except the limper, who goes ahead and calls us. Not a great flop for us, 9-8-6. We do have a low end of the gut shot. He bets into us 2 into 10. I'm just going to go ahead and flat with my fives and my gut shot. 6 is not the worst card for us, and that 6x already beat us, and now a 5 gives us a full house. He keeps jabbing at us small. I'm going to continue calling with my 5. 5 of diamonds. That's a great river card for us. Now he goes ahead and he bets 1/3 pot on the river. I'm going to go ahead and raise up with my full house. I'm going to go ahead and repot this guy with my 5s full. You can get called down by flushes, 7x type hands, maybe even some larger pairs that just don't believe us. I didn't think he would call after the block bet on the river. Most of the time, those small bets are not necessarily particularly strong ranges, and those are often a good indicator that the players will fold to a raise. I don't have a ton of data or research on that yet, though. I've just seen that in very preliminary fashion. Obviously, I'm not bluffing there. I want to get called, but the small river bet often tells me the guy is weaker and going to be more inclined to fold to a river raise than if he used a more standard size 2/3 to pot size bet. This player's been limping at least only once, but still, that's usually enough of an indication the guy's a wreck, so we'll go ahead and tag him right away. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table, recreational player limps. We're going to go ahead and raise up from our big blind. You know, something like our button raise first in range, low to mid 40%, including 10-9 suited. He calls and checks to us on Jack Deuce Deuce two-tone, so we'll go ahead and range bet small, and he instantly folds. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind. We can raise 9-8 offsuit. Towards the bottom of our raise first in range, but a fine hand to do it with. We got an ace-6-5 rainbow flop. We'll go ahead and check range. Lower left-hand table will raise first in with pocket queens on the button. The player bets, but he bets about 2/3. I don't want to check raise bluff a wreck, especially against that size. And however, I don't want to fold my gut shot to the nuts either. So I'm going to go ahead and check call and reevaluate based on the turn. I'm going to check to him again on that board pairing 5 turn. Should he check back to turn, I will be bluffing the river or value betting if I hit, but I will be betting the river almost 100% of the time. Against the pot-sized turn barrel, I will just fold my 9-high gut shot, though. Lower left-hand table, we'll go ahead and range bet on the ace-ace-8 rainbow flop against the big blind who defended and then check to us on the flop. Lower right-hand table, we're going to raise first in from the button with queen-8 of diamonds. Lower left-hand table, we get check call, then we get a king to peel on the turn. We're going to go ahead and check this back and evaluate our decisions on the river, assuming we don't get let into. Yeah, when he checks, we'll check back. Lower right-hand table, 7-5 deuce, two-tone board. We have queen-8, no backdoor draws, 2 players in the pot, so we will not bluff at that. We will check back. Lower left-hand table, the pocket queen is trying to decide if there's merit in the thin value, but trying to get value from an 8x type hand. It's a little thin, but I'm going to go ahead and do it, see if I can't get called by something kind of wonky. I like to try to get these thin value bets in there, even though I am value cutting myself some of the time. Also helps justify all the bluffs I put into that line that range bet the flop, check back the turn, and need to stab the river because they have no hope of winning. Got a recreational player, at least a presumed rec, who's limping middle position. We'll go ahead and isolate him up with something like our middle position range, including pocket aces. Low upper right-hand table, our blind on blind open gets 3-bet. We'll fold the ace-7 offsuit. We get 3-bet in position to 14. I really can't have a small 4-bet, as my small 4-bet size would be about 38 blinds, and that's too large to 4-bet fold. So I think I'm just going to be jamming all of my 4-bet range, including aces. If he has a strong hand, he's not going to get away putting me on a hand like ace-king. I guess the other option would be to go ahead and flat it, and treat it almost like it's a 4-bet yourself where you trap with aces. I think I'd rather just 4-bet jam in that spot there, though. Now, upper right-hand table, the button raises first in. You know, we raise first in from the button rather, and we get 3-bet by the big blind. Ace King, we can go ahead and 4-bet and call off in this spot, so that's what we're going to do. We're also going to be shutting down our table after these orbits end and wrapping the session up. He hasn't 3-bet yet, but he's only had 7 opportunities. Doesn't tell us anything about his range thus far. He calls the 4-bet, and we get an Ace-5-4 two-tone flop. About as good a flop as we could hope for with our particular hand. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. Our range is going to look something like aces, kings, queen, ace, king, and maybe ace-jack offsuit as our pre-flop bluff, with the other strong hands going into a call range. He could be flat with worse ace-x hands, you know, like ace, queen, the suited and offsuit against the 4-bets. I'm going to go ahead and range bet this small. You know, obviously not worried about ace-king being beat there. If he trapped me with aces and hit the case ace on the flop and he's the exact last remaining combo of it, more power to him. Let's see here. Lower right-hand table, we got a queen 9-3 two-tone flop. We go ahead and range bet it small. The recreational player comes along. We don't have a ton of outs to bluff catchers, but our ace-high is an out to a value bet type hand. Plus, I can put a lot of pressure on his 9x, 3x type hands by overbetting. If I go to about 12, I'll go to about 13, setting me up where I can even consider jamming the river on this guy as a bluff if I would like. They're going to move him off so much of his range, so much of the time right there just by doing that. That works, and those are the last of our hands, so our session is complete. I'll be shutting it down now. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you had a good time watching the video. I know I enjoyed making it. Until next time, this is Charlie Murphy signing off, and goodbye.